My name is Zach Kemper, and I have a problem. I don't like asking other people for help. I enjoy being needed by others, but sometimes I have a hard time needing other people. So as you might imagine, I felt a little bit guilty and convicted when a few weeks back I was talking on the phone with a friend of mine, and I was trying to convince him that he needed to allow others to help him. And as I'm talking with my friend, encouraging him, what he had just gone through, I'm not going to get into the details, but what he had just gone through is he had some kidney stones. They're working their way through his body, and he had a special situation where after a big process, and a big long process, the doctor said, hey, you need to take it easy. Okay, this has been really hard on you. This has been really hard on your body. All the things we've had to do, and you need to get some help. I know you work at a farm. I know you have a lot of work to do, but you need to have other people help you out. So I'm talking to him on the phone saying, so are you doing that? Well, no, not really. No. And I'm trying to convince him that he needs to allow other people to help him out. And all the while I'm thinking, hey, this is not exactly my strength either. And I imagine that in this room, a lot of us would say, hey, we're kind of in that same boat. And in our situations, it's not just that we need help when we're recovering from a surgery or something of that nature, but it's in those times when we need people's help and we have to come face to face with it, where we say, hey, this is kind of hard for me. This is difficult for me to let someone else help in this area over here. And it's not that that's the only time, but that makes us aware of what a struggle it can be sometimes to entrust other people with responsibility. And we all have responsibilities that we can entrust other people. Sometimes they're big and sometimes they're small. Sometimes we can say, I have lots of responsibilities, but they're all so small. I mean, can I really entrust those to someone else? And maybe it's something like making an evening meal, making breakfast, mowing the lawn. It could be taking out the trash, feeding the pets, clearing the table, watering the garden, or some small task that we do that is our responsibility. And we go, hey, well, really entrust that to someone else? I mean, that's so small. I mean, I can take care of that myself. But sometimes we say, but I'm not sure if I can entrust responsibilities to other people because my responsibilities are too big. Can I really give that to someone else? And we can look at something like maybe planning an event, maybe raising your children or having your children be watched, maybe keeping track of the finances. We say, oh, this is too big of a responsibility. Can I really entrust this to someone else? Or maybe managing a company, tackling a complex project at work, maybe making a deadline at work, maybe fighting a battle, maybe helping a friend in a conflict or a friend who's struggling with a sin and say, I need to be involved with that. I can't entrust it to someone else. Maybe it's something as simple as sharing the gospel and we go, this is too big of a responsibility to let someone else have. And maybe you'll even looked at these things as I read them off and you said, Zach, I know that I can entrust those to someone else, but really, why do I need to entrust those responsibilities to someone else? I can, but why should I? And you know what? We are in, this is delightful this morning as we jump into this text because I don't necessarily have to answer this because the Bible is going to answer this question for us. And I'm really excited about that because as we look at all these different things that we can entrust other people and knowing that it is a challenge for so many of us to entrust responsibility, we have a fantastic text that we're going to be going back to again this morning in Exodus chapter 18. And I like this passage. And the reason I like this passage is I am just amazed as I look at Moses, and I appreciate as I look at Moses in the account here, the humility that he is going to demonstrate. First of all, the fact that he's willing to take this advice from his father-in-law. I love seeing that humility to say his father-in-law comes in and he says, you're doing something wrong, and Moses is going to be willing to take that advice. Furthermore, I love the humility that Moses demonstrates, the fact that he's not only seen and recording not only seeing a mistake in his life, not only changing the mistake in his life, but also he's going to write it down in Scripture. Moses is the author of Exodus chapter 18. In other words, he's saying, okay, this is what I did wrong. This is when someone came and told me I was doing this wrong. And this is how I changed it. And the reason I'm writing this down, the reason Moses is writing this down is because he wants later readers to be able to learn from his example and a mistake that he had made. And when he learned a very important lesson on entrusting responsibility to others, all right? So we're going to be continuing on in our Moses series and looking at this. And just by way of background, where we are right now in this story, last week we were talking about this first battle that the Israelites came in and they were fighting the Amalekites, and the Amalekites were trying to pick off the Israelites, and we talked about that this last week. And our story today happens, let me see if I can get my laser to work here. It's not going to show up. Anyway, this southern route, as they're going down, you see where the Red Sea is there on the right. You see this area called Midian, all right? Midian is where Moses had found his wife, okay? And this is where his father-in-law is living. And as Moses is coming out of Egypt, leading all this big tribe of the nation of Israel, all these tribes, he's bringing them across through the desert here. He's going to near a place called Midian where his father-in-law is. And his father-in-law comes to visit him. Now, there's two reasons why he comes to visit him. First reason is that Moses' father-in-law has heard about all the incredible things that God has been doing in the nation of Israel. He's heard about the 10 plagues. He's heard about how all of Pharaoh's army was wiped out in the Red Sea. He's heard about these things, and he is impressed by them. And the second reason is because Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is bringing Moses' wife and kids to come reunite them with their father. Now, we aren't exactly told in the Scriptures when Moses sent them back to the father-in-law. It might have been as he's traveling along the road and almost has this near-death experience. But it might be later on as they were in Egypt and maybe things were getting hostile with the Egyptians. And the Bible doesn't record when they were sent back. But it's really not that significant of a detail, or Moses would have listed it here for us. The important thing we need to see is that here, Moses' father-in-law is coming back to meet him. And as he comes back to meet him, there is this great reunion. Moses brings his father-in-law into his tent. He says, come on, Jethro, let me tell you about all the incredible things that God has been doing. And he gives this big, long account. They're eating together, and Jethro praises God for what has just taken place and gives glory to God. And there's just this great reunion of these two men. And then something happens. Then as Moses finishes up the evening meal, they go to bed. And in chapter 18, verse 13, as was read for us this morning, this is what happens the next day. Look at this. The next day, it says, Moses took his seat to serve as a judge for the people. And they stood around him from morning until evening. All right, so there's just been this great family reunion with Jethro and Moses. And the very next morning, here Moses gets up, and he's going to sit as a judge from the beginning, the crack of dawn, all the way up until evening. And Jethro looks at this, and he watches this. And Jethro is not so excited by what he sees. And as Jethro looks at this and observes this, he's going to give some advice to Moses. He's going to say, you need to entrust responsibility to others. And not only is he going to tell him why he needs to entrust it, but we're going to see that it's very important that he not carry the burden alone. Look at this. Look at what Jethro says in verse 14. He says, when his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as the judge, while all these people are standing around you from morning until evening? Now, there's something significant here in the text. When Jethro is saying to Moses, why do you alone, that's a key word. Why are you alone standing as judge over the people? Now, I want us to put this in the context of what's going on. I mean, we may see one person acting as the judge, settling all these disputes for all these people, and we think, well, okay, what's wrong with that? From morning until evening, he was the judge. But I want us to get a perspective of how many people Moses was the judge for. Anyone have any ideas of how many Israelites there are at this point in time that Moses is leading out of the nation of Israel? Any guesses? Want to throw out a number for me? 2 million. Now, where do we get this number? We find, when we look in numbers, we find that there's over 600,000 men. That's not including the women, so we can double that, and that's not including the children. We're looking at over 2 million people, and how many judges? 1. Now, it shouldn't surprise us at all that Jethro is observing this and going, okay, we have 2 million people here, we have one guy, and he thinks he can do it alone. It's no wonder why Jethro looks at this, and we aren't told how long this line is, but if you think of conflicts or problems among 2 million people, how long is that line going to be to come and talk to Moses? That's pretty long. It's no wonder why Jethro is going to come to Moses afterwards and say, Moses, what's this you're doing here for these people? Why are you alone sitting as judge while all these people gather around you from morning until evening? I mean, this isn't computing. I mean, what are you thinking? And I think that there's something very revealing in Moses' answer, all right? Because Jethro is going to ask him essentially this question. Why do you think it's your burden to carry alone? And I think we can ask the same questions to ourselves and say, why do we often carry the burden alone? And inside of Moses' answer, we're going to find something very revealing from his life, and I think it's something very revealing for our own lives as well. Look at how Moses is going to answer his father-in-law in verses 15 and 16. This is what Moses says. Moses answered him, because the people come to me to seek God's will. And whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me. And I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. See, if you were here in some of the past weeks, but if you're just joining us today, something that we need to let you know is that Moses had a very special position in the nation of Israel. He was a prophet. And what a prophet did for a nation was they were a go-between between that nation and God. They represented the nation to God, and they represented God to the nation. They were that go-between, a very important place. So it's no wonder when the people have a dispute and they want to know what God's will is, who do they go to? The prophet. Because the prophet is going to represent God and his will to the people. So no wonder we're going to go to the prophet. So all the people naturally are thinking, okay, Moses, you can settle this dispute for me because you know what God's will is. And I think Moses as well, knowing his position in the nation of Israel, when he's thinking about the burden he's carrying all by himself, he thinks, wait a minute, I think this burden is mine to carry alone, first of all, because, you know, I see that this is my position. You know, this is my occupation. I got ahead of myself for a second. I think this is my occupation. This is a part of my job description. I am a prophet. Who else is qualified to do this? I need to be doing this. Look, this is what God has told me to do. And I think sometimes we can look at responsibilities. We can be carrying burdens alone because we're thinking similarly to Moses. We say, hey, this falls underneath my job description. This is my responsibility. Maybe at work you say, this is my job description. Maybe as a parent you say, well, I'm a dad. I'm a mom. This is my responsibility. Maybe it's in a ministry and we go, well, this is a part of the job description of my ministry. And you say, well, I need to be doing this alone. Sometimes we expect it to be our burden alone because others are expecting us to do it. Maybe we say to ourselves, well, someone has to do this, so it may as well be me. You know, I don't really mind doing it, so I may as well do it by myself. Or sometimes, as is the case, we think, hey, you know, I got to do this myself because I messed this up all by myself. And if I mess this up all by myself, I can't ask someone else to fix it because I messed it up. I better fix it all by myself. I'll give you an example. Earlier this week, I was fixing something on the computer upstairs, and for some reason I moved the file and I deleted the whole database for all of our songs by accident. I moved it in the wrong place, and I thought, uh-oh, I better fix this. And in that moment, I'm not thinking about what I was actually going to be preaching later on this week. In that moment, I thought, I can't call someone else and ask them to do this. I messed this up. I better fix it. Now, that took me a couple hours to fix that, where if I had called the right person, they'd have come and they'd have fixed it lickety-split, all right? But sometimes we face those situations in our life where we think, you know, this burden is mine alone to carry because I messed it up, so I should fix it all by myself. And in Moses' case, he is thinking, this burden is mine alone to carry because I and no one else is the prophet. This is my job description. I need to do it all by myself. Another reason why we can often think that this burden is ours alone to carry is because sometimes we may like how it feels to be needed. Now, Moses is sitting there working from morning until evening. He had gifts and abilities that no one else had. He was the prophet that had to feel good. Anyone ever woken up and had one of those incredibly busy days before? You know what I'm talking about? Where you're firing all cylinders, you're giving your 110%. You wake up in the morning, you hit the ground running, and you're going. But what's amazing about this day is you are making great progress. You're getting things done in a timely manner. You're making very little or no mistakes, and you're going. You're going at work. You come home and you're going, just knocking one thing out after another, and you lay your head down on the pillow on that night, and you think to yourself, that was a busy day, but man, I killed it. That was awesome. Boy, I got so much done. I made the most of every minute of this day. And we can like how that feels. We can say, man, that felt so good that I was able to get all those things done. And when we lay our head down on the pillow and we're thinking all those great thoughts about ourselves, sometimes we need to pause and ask ourselves, wait a minute, is God up there in heaven going, oh, you see Zach Kemper right there? He just gave me a really great day. I like that guy right now. He gave his 110% morning until evening. He didn't waste a single second that I gave him. He's the man, No, is that what God's thinking? Is God really finding meaning, satisfaction, and purpose for us based on how well we are doing? I read a great book, and some of you may have read it before. It's called The Search for Significance. And the author brings out a fantastic point. He says, God is not delighted in you based on your performance. God's not going up in heaven, God's not up in heaven or looking at you going, this person's not doing very well. I'm not very happy with this person. Or this person's accomplishing a lot. I really like this person over. God's not doing that. God's approval of us, God's delight in us is not based on our performance. So if I am taking delight in myself or finding satisfaction in myself based on my performance, that's not from God. If I'm feeling displeased because I'm not busy all the time, that's not from God. Now, did Moses feel this way? Did Moses feel did Moses like how it felt to be going from morning until evening? Now, the text doesn't really say that. Is there a possibility that that's how he felt? It's possible, but I'm not totally 100% convinced. But the reason I left this in there is because I know for myself, I know for many of us, sometimes we carry the burden alone because we like how it feels to be needed. We like that feeling. We crave that feeling, and we've started to find, dare I say, meaning and purpose in being busy. That sometimes is the case for us as Christians, even though that is not really where God desires for us to find satisfaction. And a third reason that we find why we often carry the burden alone from this passage is that sometimes we may feel, or it might be the reality that we might be the most qualified. Moses was the prophet in this situation. And even after Moses has delegated all these, so many of these responsibilities, we've even find, and I'm going to jump ahead for a second here to point this out, because even after Moses has delegated these responsibilities, we still find that he is the most qualified of anyone for this responsibility of being the judge. Look at this, Exodus chapter 18, verse 26. After he's delegated it out, he says, they served as judges for the people at all times. But the difficult cases they brought to Moses, and the simple ones they decided themselves. In other words, the simple cases were given to these other people and entrusted to them. Yet the very difficult ones were brought to Moses. Why? Because he was the most qualified. He was the prophet. So in the midst of that, when we're feeling like, oh, hey, I want to do this alone, sometimes one of the motivators is that we may be the most qualified, or at least we may feel that we are the most qualified. And that gives us a set of fears. First fear is sometimes we say, hey, things may not get done right. I'm the most qualified to do this. I got to do this alone, and if I trust this to someone else, they aren't as qualified as I am, and they might not do it correctly. Now, were there times when these people who Moses set up as judges didn't make the same decision on the matter that Moses would have made? I think so. I think so. They weren't perfect people that were set up. We all make mistakes. I imagine these people sometimes made mistakes. I imagine sometimes they didn't get things done right. I imagine sometimes details fell through the cracks. Sometimes they dropped the ball. And that could have been a hindrance for Moses saying, hey, you know, I'm not sure if I should delegate this out because I'm the most qualified. Things may not get done right. A second fear that Moses may have faced is that others may do things differently. I mean, we're all people, right? We're all different people. We all have our own strengths. We all have our own weaknesses. No one does things exactly the same as another person, especially if it's a more complex task. Sometimes easier things can look a lot more similar, but we tend to do things differently than others. I'll give you an example. A few months back when Peter was born, I had some of my brothers-in-law were in town. Aaron's family came. They came to meet Peter, and it's a great time we had. And the ladies, we said, hey, ladies, go take a break. You know, us guys, we're gonna man the fort here, and you go out for some coffee or something, and we're going to take care of this. So it just so happened that the time that we sent them out for was lunchtime. So just 3 men left in the house. It's time for lunch, and it's time to show off, you know, our mad cooking skills. So back in the day, I consider myself an expert in the mac and cheese arena, all right? Probably going to go on my tombstone someday, my claim to fame, mac and cheese extraordinaire, all right? So just as us 3 guys were sitting down getting ready for lunch, I pull out the mac and cheese box, about to perform some magic and, you know, just really impress these guys. And just then one of my brothers-in-law says, hey, let me make that. Now, I know that I am the most qualified to make this mac and cheese. I mean, I have got this down to a science. I know how to cook the noodles just right for just just the right texture. Add some certain things in there while the noodles are cooking just so that I can get the best flavor in those. I mean, I have this down to a science. But I got to be polite because my brother-in-law just asked me to make the mac and cheese, so fine, I got to delegate this out to him. But he's going to do things differently. Oh, he might miss some of these details. He might leave some things out. And you know what? I let him do it, risking a whole 50 cents. And you know what? He left some things out. And he added some other things. And he made better mac and cheese than I have ever made in my life. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. You know, it doesn't always turn out to a better end. But the fact is that people do things differently. And whether or not we actually are the most qualified or we just think we are the most qualified, these fears become very real fears in our life that can keep us from entrusting responsibility to other people. And another fear, this third one I want to throw up here, is that people may be expecting us to do it. All right? I am willing to guarantee that when Moses decided to entrust some of this responsibility to other people, that some of the people who used to come to Moses for decisions were a little disappointed. Wait a minute. I got to go to this other guy now? I used to go to Moses. I know Moses is the most qualified, and I got to go to this second-rate guy over here? I mean, I expected Moses that this is Moses' job. How could he be given this responsibility to someone else? I imagine there were people that were feeling that way, and I imagine as Moses was thinking about this going, what will people think? I mean, I am the most qualified. I mean, other people are expecting me to be doing this. You know, but the question is, you know, if someone is expecting you to do it, does that really mean that you have to do it all by yourself and you can't delegate responsibility? Imagine a CEO in a company. A CEO in a company, part of the expectation is that he makes important decisions on behalf of that company, isn't it? And when it comes to a time when an important decision is to be made, and let's say another person who's in charge of this wing over here comes to him and he says, hey, there's a really important decision to be made here, and I don't know what to do. And the CEO says, you know, I don't know what to do either, but you know what? You know more about the situation. You know more of the details. You know more what's going on. You're closer to the situation. I'm going to let you handle it. I'm going to back you 110%. You do it. Whatever decision you make, that's yours. Now is the board going to gather together after that and say to the CEO, hey, no, that should have been yours? you should have made that decision? Or are they going to say, you know, that might have been a smart move there. This person might have known a lot more about that than you did. You know, sometimes that pressure of making the expectation of that, the pressure of the expectation and making those decisions can cause us to make sometimes a poor decision and keep the responsibility to ourselves, when sometimes it may be better to entrust that to someone else. If people are expecting us to do it, that can be a fear that can keep us from entrusting responsibility to others. So, what are some reasons we often carry the burden alone? We may think it's ours to carry alone. We might think it's part of our job description. We may like how it feels to be needed. We may be the most qualified, which will cause us to fear that others won't do things right, they might do things differently, or that people are expecting us to do it. But in all these situations, the encouragement that we find from the passage here is that God still desires us to entrust responsibility to others. And why should we entrust responsibility to others? Well, the first thing that we find in our text is because people suffer when we try to meet the needs alone. Look again in the text here in Exodus chapter 18, starting in verse 17. Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times. But have them bring every difficult case to you, the simple ones they can decide for themselves. That will make your load lighter, because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. See, what sometimes happens when we try to bear the burden alone is that other people suffer. Whether it be in our ministries, whether it be in our jobs, whether it be in our families, whether it be in our Christian lives, they suffer when we try to do these things alone. The first reason why is because oftentimes there are other needs that are being neglected because of this burden. What was Moses' job? He was to be a prophet to the people, wasn't he? And look what Jethro says in verse 19. He says, now listen to me. I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring the disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions. Show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. I mean, Moses, if all you're doing all the time is deciding people's cases, how are you ever going to teach them what God expects of them? I mean, you're not addressing the root issue. You're not teaching them a different way to live. Instead, you're just treating the symptoms. And that's self-destructive. Other things are falling through the cracks because you are not delegating this responsibility. Other needs are being neglected. See, all of us have limited resources. All of us have limited energy, don't we? I mean, we only have a set amount of time and energy in a day, in a year, and in a lifetime. And there's so many more needs than the amount of energy and time that we have, even in a lifetime, for us to ever meet them all. You know, I imagine, imagine if Skeeter showed up a Sunday one morning with one piece of candy, all right? And the little kids come to him, and there's one piece of candy. And there's all these little guys going, I want the candy. And there's a bunch of adults, too, going, I want the candy, And you have all these people vying for that. And there's these limited resources. And we go, wait. And Skeeter's got to make a decision. Where do I put this? That's the way our lives actually are, all right? Yeah, don't get Skeeter eat himself. Yeah, no, they got to make a decision. That's the way our lives are. We have limited resources. And if we give to one, other things are not going to get it, all right? And with Moses trying to pour all his eggs into one basket, trying to fill this burden, not delegate it, other things were being neglected in the process. You know, my dad, He's currently the president of Grace Bible College. But before he was that, he was out on the mission field. And out on the mission field, he didn't delegate a whole lot of things. Yes, he entrusted with things, but he did some micromanaging as well. And when he came back to Grace Bible College, that was one thing that really had to change, to learn how to delegate things. This has been a huge area of growth in his life. But I remember one point, there was a time when he was teaching freshman theology at Grace Bible College. Now, that's something that's always been done, is the president would teach one of the freshman theology classes at Grace Bible College. And I remember the board, he shared with me, the board came to him and said, no, we do not want you doing that anymore. We don't want you investing in this way, because we have other people who are plenty qualified to teach that class. We know you love doing it. We know you enjoy it. But we want someone else to do that, because as you're doing that, there are other things that we want you to be doing, parts of your job that other people can't be doing, that you need to be doing. So you need to invest here and not there. See, the reality is there are other needs that are being neglected when we keep this burden to ourselves. Another reason why we need to entrust responsibility to others is that another ways that people suffer is sometimes when we are doing it ourselves, we limit how much can be done. I mean, think about Moses. As the people are gathered there from morning until evening, over 2 million people. Is Moses doing a good job deciding the cases all by himself? There is no way. Are people going home feeling satisfied? There is no way. That's why Jethro says to him in verse 23, if you do this and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. They were not being satisfied. They were not having their disputes heard. And even if they were having their disputes heard, if you have 5,000 more people waiting outside your tent, are you going to spend the adequate enough time on this one decision? No. There was a bottleneck there. And sometimes we create our own bottlenecks, and people suffer when we try to meet the needs alone because we limit how much can be done, and we bottleneck the situation. You know, I imagine it was almost like if I came into the church and said, hey, you know, I imagine everyone had shoes that can be shined, and I say, okay, I'm going to shine everyone's shoes in one day. Would that happen? No, I'm not that good of a shoe shiner. I may have shined a couple of shoes in my life, but this would not happen right here, all right? I'll just tell you right now. And there would be a bottleneck that if everyone needed their shoes to be shined, it would not happen if I kept it all to myself. Now, if entrusted that responsibility to a few more people, okay, then that might happen. But if I try to do it all by myself, I limit how much can be done. And thankfully, Moses listened to his father-in-law, and even though he liked doing it by himself, even though there was so much that he was able to do, even though he was so qualified, he was limiting what could be done, and the people were not going home satisfied. So others suffer when we try to meet the needs alone. But also something else that happens is that when we need to entrust responsibility to others because people suffer. Did I do the same thing back up there again? Yes, I did. Oh, well, I deleted a slide by accident, so you're going to have to just, all right. You just have to listen to me and not see the slide. All right. Another reason is why we need to entrust responsibility to others is because we need to give other people the opportunity to grow. As Exodus 18:24-26 shows, is that when he finally started delegating these things, look what happened. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all of Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and they served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. See, other people need the opportunity to grow. We equip other people when we ask them to do things that are hard for them to do, or maybe that are difficult. I remember when my mom first entrusted me with the responsibility of cleaning the bathroom. Wasn't so stoked about that. But she entrusted me with the responsibility to clean the bathroom, and the toilet was the part that I hated doing the most, all right? But I had this chore, and I grew. I learned how to clean the toilet. I learned to not be as disgusted with cleaning the toilet as I was initially. And then, actually even later on, when I went to college, I actually made money cleaning the toilet as doing that as one of the things in the men's dorm, which is a whole nother level of toilet cleaning right there, I'll just say right now. But the fact is, we equip others when we ask them to do things that are hard for them. And you know what? I even thanked my mom later for asking and having me clean the toilet, among other responsibilities that she entrusted to me. Another thing is that it might not always be something that other people won't want to do. Sometimes we'll ask people to do it, and sometimes it's a scenario like mine where I didn't want to do it, but it was something that was an opportunity for me to grow. Sometimes other people are looking for a way to be stretched and grown. Not everyone is kicking against responsibility, thinking, oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, I can't believe you delegated that to me. Why didn't you just do it by yourself? Sometimes people are looking for things that are even beyond their own abilities to do because they are with the program of desiring to grow themselves. When I was at Grace Bible College, they started up a new ministry, and it was presented to us, and it was the ministry team. And what the ministry team did was they went and they would preach in different places. Now, I was studying to become a pastor, but I had never preached before. The idea scared me. I didn't like being in front of people. I didn't like reading in front of people, and that was a scary thing for me. But I was excited that they brought this opportunity before me and they trusted this to me because I knew that I needed to be stretched and grown, and I wanted to be stretched in that specific area. This burden is not always overwhelming as we might think, and sometimes we think it's overwhelming because we've held on to it ourselves for so long. It's become so overwhelming for us that we think if I entrust it to someone else, it's going to be just as overwhelming for them because we think that they're going to have to do it alone as well. But when we entrust responsibility to others, it lightens the load, just as in Moses' case, and it becomes possible to do, and people go home satisfied. The last reason as well why we see that it can help be an opportunity for other peoples to grow is because others are encouraged to know that we are confident in their abilities. I mean, think about Moses in this case. Moses serving alone as judge. You have 2 million people, and Moses wants to do it all by himself. And even as Jethro says, appoint qualified people, appoint trustworthy people that hate dishonest gain, that are trustworthy, and have them be judges, have them be officials over the people. There were people that were plenty qualified to serve as judges. And for Moses to not entrust them with this responsibility was, in essence, Moses saying, I don't think you can do it. I am the only one that can do it. That's the message that he was communicating, even if he did not realize it to all the people. I had an opportunity. I know I'm giving a lot of examples from Grace Bible College today, but I have another example being a resident assistant at Grace Bible College. I remember applying for this when I was a freshman because I said, this is a great stepping stone. This is a great way to be challenged. And I remember missing it and not being accepted as a residence assistant. Now, that was fine. You apply for some things, and sometimes you don't get it. But later on, I went and was talking to some of my friends. And two of my friends, as they're talking with me, as I share with them the fact that I didn't get the position, they said, well, that's good, because we've been talking, and we don't think you would have made a good residence assistant. Oh. Ouch. No, I applied to be a resident assistant because I figured it'd be a good stepping stone. I wanted to go into ministry someday, and I thought this would be a good challenge and a step towards doing that. All right, so you don't think I'd make a good RA? Do you think I could be a pastor someday? All right. It was very difficult for me to separate those two things. Because, in essence, what they were saying is, you don't have the abilities. You aren't qualified for that. And the reason I share that is because oftentimes in our lives, people have heard that same message. a lot of times it's fathers communicating that message to their kids, or mothers communicating that message to your kids. Oh, this is too hard for you. I know there are some things that are too hard, but there are points as well where you can entrust the responsibility and you can communicate the message to them to say, I believe in you. I think that you have what it takes. This is scary for you right now, but this will be an encouragement to you as well, because I am confident in your abilities. And Moses even set these people up to succeed, because even if a case was too hard for them, what could they do? They could still bring it to Moses. It's not as if you entrust a responsibility to someone who maybe is not as qualified, and say, oh, well, you're stuck. If it blows up, you're in trouble. You can still be there to help. But when you entrust responsibility to others, it can be something that helps them grow, even if it's just by encouraging them and being confident in their abilities. So in this account, in Exodus chapter 18, we see that there's a lot going on. First of all, we learn a lot of reasons from this text why Moses thought that he needed to do these things alone. And we share those same things. We share those same fears. We share those same struggles. But we also see in this text that just like in Moses' context, we need to entrust responsibility to others, because people suffer, whether it be in ministries, jobs, families, or even in their Christian life with God. They suffer when we try to meet the needs alone. And also because other people need the opportunity to grow. Entrusting responsibility to others is so important. It's the way God designed this world to operate, to need each other. What does God say about Adam in the garden after he creates him? He creates man, and man is in the garden. He looks at man and he goes, it's not good for man to be alone. He could have said, wait a minute. Here's a man, he's in perfect relationship with God. What do you mean it's not good for man to be alone? That's all he needs is him and God. He can do it all by himself. God says, no. It's not good for man to be alone. I will make an Ebenezer. I will make a helper suitable for him. Right from the beginning, how God created this world was for us to entrust responsibility, to need other people. That's how he's wired us. That's how he's designed us. And sometimes we look at those things that we have, those responsibilities that we have to entrust to others, and we still think, well, it's too small. Do I really need someone to make the evening meal? Do I need someone to make breakfast? Do I need someone to mow the lawn? Do I need someone to take out the trash, to feed the pets, to change a light bulb, clear the table, or water the garden? That's such a small responsibility, but we find even in those small things that God desires we entrust those to other people. That's the way he's designed it. And maybe it's those big responsibilities, planning that event, taking care of those kids, watching these finances, keeping track of those, managing a company, a complex project at work, making a deadline, fighting a battle, sharing the gospel. And we say these things are too important. I can't delegate those, but God has created us in this world to need other people, to need help, to entrust responsibilities to others. And Moses in Exodus chapter 18 learned this lesson. And we can look at Moses and we think, Moses, why did you ever try and do it all by yourself? There are 2 million people. Didn't you realize you were in over your head? I think sometimes other people are looking at us and going, don't you see the situation? You are in over your head. But all the while, we can be so much like Moses thinking, no, I need to do this all by myself. Where do we start? A good place to start may be in that thing that is overwhelming us. Or maybe in that place where someone else is saying to us, why don't you entrust some responsibility to other people? This is too much for you to do alone. What would happen if the body of Christ depended on each other, entrusted to each other, and lifted one another's loads the way God designed it to do? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the example that we find here in Exodus chapter 18. I know for myself and for many of us, we look at this account here, and we are thankful that Moses had the humility to write down this example. A place where Moses was trying to do it all by himself, and maybe he felt a little bit goofy as he recorded it, thinking, why was I ever thinking this in the first place? But thank you for his humility in recording this, that we, thousands of years later, can look back at this text, can see how we are challenged in the same way that Moses was challenged. Father, help us to be sensitive and have ears to hear the Jethros in our lives as they encourage us to entrust responsibility to others. And Father, I pray that people might be nourished through it, that ministries, people, jobs, families wouldn't suffer, but instead that more and more people would be challenged to grow and be entrusted, and that the whole body would be built up. Father, I pray all this in Jesus' name.